I'm going to kick off. This is our second edition of the Maro monthly webinar and demo. I actually don't know if that's the right name for it, but it is as of this edition. We're going to walk through the agenda here. Thanks for everyone for joining, first of all. So, agenda is very similar to last time, except that we have a new section that's inspired by a poll that we did on Twitter. So, community content, a community specific topic we wanted to cover. But we're going to start off with some quick intros. I'm going to walk through a quick demo of some of the changes and what we've been working on since our last demo. And it'll be a teaser into some of the future roadmap stuff as well. And then I believe Jaden and Gwen are going to get into our community topic, which is an AI governance deep dive. So I think along the way, if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them into the webinar Q&A. And I'm not sure exactly where that is in here, but I think it's possibly in the chat section. Gwen can let me know.
Yeah, there are some buttons at the bottom. You all should see Q&A, chat, things of that nature. Please don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. And like Jen said, we're going to try to get to them as we go, but there's a section at the end should we have time to review them as well.
Yep, great. So just to remind everyone who we are, I'll kick it off. So I'm Jen Andre. I'm the CTO here at Maro, working with a team of awesome engineers, helping build out the Maro platform. I've worked with Jen and Gwen and Jaden. We do this every time for many years now across several companies, Threat Stack Command, Rapid7, and really excited to be here. So I'll kick it over to Gwen.
Hey, folks. For those who don't know me, I'm Gwen Betts. I am our Chief Experience and Marketing Officer. So I run both marketing and product design. Like Jen said, have worked with Jen and Jaden over now a period of 3 companies in at least 10 years. So as always, we're excited to show you the latest and greatest that we are focused on here at Maro. And then Jaden.
I'm Jaden. I'm Jaden and the luckiest because when I mix up Jen and Gwen's names, it's the same names. So happy to work with them also for 10 years. I'm the CEO of Maro and excited to show you guys this demo today.
All right. So with that, I think we'll do a quick cover. What I'm going to demo to you guys pretty quickly. But these are some of the changes we teased last time during our demo webinar, and I'm happy to show them off. So the first thing really is what we have titled called Interventions Everywhere. So you might have remembered from the last demo that our kind of core first use case was around AI governance, especially around AI chatbots. And we had certain data protections that protected you from sharing information that you shouldn't be sharing per your policy with an AI chatbot like Claude or ChatGPT. So what we've done here is actually we've extended this experience so that we can intervene and do these DLP style detections across many different websites. So whether you're typing something in email, you shouldn't be sharing an email per your policy, or a user is using a website like GitHub or something else. We now have the capability to basically in real time, and there's a little screenshot here of what we're going to show you. Uh, Guiding the user that hey, like you're sharing sensitive information that's against a policy, and provide what are some remediation actions that are kind of like Grammarly. We kind of want to basically give users enough guidance so that they can fix that risky data sharing almost automatically. And that's actually what bullet point number two refers to. So the third section here around first policy and social engineering detection is more around some architecture changes that we've been implementing that help support more privacy and basically less processing and less sharing data with Maro on our backend. We understand that companies want to keep your data secure. And we at Maro, like many companies, we make use of AI to help power some of our analysis so that it is more accurate. We can actually look at things like context and prevent things that happened in the past around noisy DLP actions that just worked on regular expressions. Well, we know that customers, again, don't necessarily, shouldn't have to trust Maro or the processors that Maro used from an AI perspective. We wanted customers to be able to choose from either using local models. So I'll show this off in the demo. These are models that basically run on the user's end workstation, and or basically a bring your own model where you can use your trusted provider of choice. Let's say you have an arrangement or a contract with OpenAI. You're using something like Bedrock. We are architecturing our next generation version of the solution so that all the data gets processed with your trusted, again, either locally or with your trusted providers. And I'll show that off shortly. So with that, I'm going to just go into a very quick demo. It's not going to be super exciting. I'm going to tease that we're have in the works a pretty awesome policy builder and configuration experience. But I'll walk through some of these changes we have here in this development build. Whoops, let me just get out of there. So as a reminder for folks who aren't maybe super familiar with our platform, and Jaden is actually going to go into some more of the, especially the AI governance use cases. Um, One of our components we have is this browser extension that, again, kind of lives alongside the user as they browse. There's two kind of core sections or components. One is our social engineering detection. So this is basically a companion that, as you browse, will look for sites and content within potentially safe sites like social media or your email provider. Look for things that could be social engineering. And the other kind of use case we have here, there's nothing going on here right now, is basically that policy detection piece that helps power our AI governance piece and the next generation DLP stuff I'm going to show you. So with that, again, some of the changes we've been making here is basically allowing the user to, from a privacy first perspective, choose their own provider. So right now, the settings is basically within the browser extension settings itself. You can choose from Gemini Nano, which is actually built into Chrome. It's a local SLM or small language model that's powered. It's available with every Chrome instance. We have some other options here you can choose from, again, if you wanted to bring your own provider. And then here are some of the policies we have in place. And again, the idea here is that these would be tailored to your business. They would be pulled from our, again, teasing you to the next demo, our policy configuration experience that we're building out right now. And the other piece, again, this is a new change here. Our previous version of the browser extension exclusively used the Maro Cloud for analysis. So we have a multi-stage analysis where we're looking for things like static indicators of things within content you're browsing that could be phishing, and a second stage version that uses an LLM to confirm, reduce false positives, make sure the thing really does look suspicious, whether it's something like a crypto scam or, could be even some content like a message that could be social engineering. But the new option we have right now is basically to use privacy mode. And basically, this allows you to bring your own LLM. It uses a combination of the local LLM, Gemini Nano, that comes with Chrome, and your option to bring your own uh, uh, OpenAI configuration or other provider here. So with that, I'll just again remind you, I'll have a quick demo of what this looks like. So right here, I have for my personal email a couple of messages that look super suspicious. I'm going to actually, here, we'll close this out so you can see what it looks like. But let's say I click on one of these ones, right? What the browser extension is doing is passing it through phases. And again, none of this stuff is actually going to Maro right now. The only things that get sent tomorrow, once we actually confirm or there is a phishing result, we will send that so the security team can review it. But you can see here, if you look at this here, basically this should give you the full phishing details. And again, I think, it's not very different from our previous experience, but all of this stuff does run locally and with the bring your own model stuff. So Maro is not processing the user's data. So that helps us retain privacy. The other piece I'm going to demo here is kind of the other use case. Again, like Maro historically has had the ability to monitor activity, prevent data leakage through tools like ChatGPT and Claude. but we've basically extended this to work across many different websites. So inputs that you're sharing here. And then we've also extended our policy configuration experience to be smarter and have that privacy approach where it's using a local model or a bring your own model approach. So I want to show you the power of this and how this is kind of different from traditional DLP solutions. I'll do it with a use case, but I have a policy I created here around Coca-Cola trade secret protection. And again, most DLP solutions and ours does as well, will rely on basically static indicators like regular expressions, but these things can have a number of false positives. And they're not, a lot of these solutions work after the fact. They don't actually notify the user in real time until the data is actually accidentally shared via email or potentially through a website they shouldn't share it on. But let's say I'm at Coca-Cola and I'm a user here and I'm sharing something that looks like the Coca-Cola secret recipe. So what this is going to do here is actually pop up a notification that says, hey, you're not allowed to do that. The text here explicitly lists ingredients in Coca-Cola secret recipe. It actually prevents the user from submitting the data in the input form. And I think one of the cool things that we're working on here is basically the ability to uh, give the user remediation actions so they can quickly remove the information that is sensitive. I'm not sure what's going on with the pay spin here. If my website doesn't like it, but basically, if you click redact trade secret information here, this will actually remove the sensitive information. We have other remediation actions, such as if they're using the wrong website, for example, maybe they're not allowed to use Payspin. There's another website that they can use. You could actually guide the user to a different page. So we want to make that super flexible. Um, I think one of the things here I also want to show off here is that this shouldn't trigger again, like just on like a lot of DLP solutions. We don't want this to actually trigger on any mention of a secret recipe. That would be way too noisy and way too annoying for the user. So if you type something like, "I'm sorry, Bob, we won't disclose Coca-Cola's secret recipe. That's a trade secret." Again, we want this to actually not trigger here. And you can see here, it actually did not pop up a violation because our policy is actually it looks for things that, ignores things that are just general discussion of the fact that there is our secret recipe for Coca-Cola. We only want to alert on things that are explicit violations and sharing of the content of the recipe. And again, with the power of local language models, we can do that. We can again prevent those false positives while keeping the data local and really only alerting the security team or kind of sharing that data when there is a violation. So with that, I think that's the demo. There looks like there's one question
Yeah, I
here.
was just going to highlight Jen. Do you need me to read it or do you have it?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now. Yeah, how can the system allow entry of client-sensitive information to specific sites like Salesforce CRM, but blocked from entry to other systems like ChatGPT? That's actually a great question. And I will say stay tuned for the next demo because what Gwen and the team have designed is actually a really awesome policy configuration experience. So what we are designing on the front end of this is basically the ability to set specific policies for specific sites and map those behavior rules that you want to be enforced, allowed on certain sites to be allowed, and the ones you want to be blocked on certain sites to be blocked. So we have this concept of what's called trusted sites, for example. So trusted sites are things that you would use on a daily basis. So, in our case, maybe it's Google Workspace or Microsoft tools or Notion, right? You don't necessarily want to alert on policy violations there, but everything else, right, is something that you would want to actually monitor for and actually alert on. So there's basically configurability that we built into the user experience to allow you to toggle it on and off for certain sites.
Yep. And as with this current release, to make it explicit from what you're saying too, Jen, with this current release, you'll be able to essentially expand that behavior control to all websites like Salesforce and ChatGPT and specify what is allowed behavior and what is not. With an upcoming release that you'll see in our next newsletter and demo, we're actually allowing you to also segment that by role and people within your organization. So you can imagine there should be certain people who are allowed to enter data into something like Salesforce, and there should be people that should not be allowed to do that. So this gives you a heck of a lot more and will give you a heck of a lot more granular control of who has access and what specific behavior controls will apply to them as well. You can imagine, for example, like teams like legal teams, they have privileged access and privileged behavior in ways that some folks do not too. So that's kind of what we're building towards in the next month.
Great. Checking to see if I don't think there's any other questions. Happy to answer more at the end if anyone can think of stuff. But with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Gwen and Jaden, who are gonna.
Yeah, so I'll take over the screen because our good friend Jaden is actually in Japan right now. So Wi-Fi is always a little bit of a hard spot. Okay, Jaden, take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, Cloudflare issues plus Japan is a toxic combination. So really great to be here with you guys. What Gwen and I wanted to do was answer really, yeah, a community question that came up during our last demo that said, hey, we saw a really, we admit, a quick demo of the AI governance features in Maro, but can we get a little bit deeper into the way that the tool helps really enforce an AI governance strategy? And actually, that question starts from how we can rethink what an AI governance strategy itself should look like. Like, what is it capable of, and what are we as security leaders able to do in terms of like providing oversight and getting visibility into usage of AI in order to build more effective AI governance strategies. And the way that we'd hoped to share this with you guys today was really just to openly give you a lot of the feedback and the advice we've heard from 80 security leaders over the past couple of months. I know that several of the folks in this demo, several of the attendees should hear themselves reflected in some of the tips that we're going to be sharing in this section. So thank you to everybody that we've spoken to over the course of different conferences, individual workshops, and then just one-off calls with folks that have been so eager to be able to share with their peers how they are handling this internally to their organizations. I think that the reality of the situation starts here. So regardless of your industry, like whether or not you're in a highly regulated space like fintech or health tech, or you're in a space where users should be allowed to do whatever they want to achieve the mission of your organization, or if you're an academic institution to push forward the research happening at your institution and society at large. The reality is that in both situations, AI users are definitely doing whatever they want to in order to achieve their own personal goals. And on the left-hand side here, you can see, of course, that 80% of users, Microsoft reported, were bringing their own AI tools to work as of last year. And then KPMG said earlier this year that closer to 60% of employees say, hey, even if I'm not getting formal approval from my IT or security teams, I'm just going to use the tool anyways. And most of the security leaders we talk to are fully aware of this fact. And again, you basically take one of two strategies. You say, let's lock everything by default, and then let's slowly build a kind of governance strategy around opening up very specific use cases, excuse me, for the usage of AI. Or organizations will say, actually, let's just treat this like, or let's just open it all up. And I think organizations like that is to get ability. So the last slide I'm going to share here is a framework that we started to build around what an AI governance and guidance loop should look like from Maro's perspective. But again, this is feedback that's really been sourced from all the conversations that we had with our wonderful CISOs. And what I'll do is I'll start from the left-hand side here and say that everything begins with visibility. the ability to observe actual AI usage. I think if you rewind time to late 2023 and early 2024, the strategy was really just to get a policy in place for your employee usage policy in place as quickly as possible. So it was almost like organizations were forced to skip into the define portion of this loop. And now, with the existence of technologies like Maro, we help to show, our design partners, our customers, that it's possible to start kind of to the left of a paper policy. So what we're going to show you in the demo today is how you can start to observe first the reality of how your users are engaging with AI. And then as you start to define policy for your users, you don't want that to be something that just exists on paper. In fact, you want to make sure that you're guiding users to the right conclusions. You see that kind of reflected in the spirit of what Jen had demoed earlier. So the question is, how is your security stack guiding users to the right decision-making points as you're updating that policy? And then on the right-hand side, what we see as the next frontier of policy, which you could say started from just access level controls, is how can we start to apply more granularity to those things? So in the same way that identity programs are evolving today, you can see identity programs kind of linking up, or identity strategies linking up with different tool sets like Maro and saying, okay, at first we were pretty broad about what it meant for a user to be able to engage in AI. But as we've continued to build out our governance strategy, it's starting to apply to specific teams and then to specific roles. And of course, to wrap it all up, we, at least at Maro, don't believe, there's really any value to just a policy on paper unless it's affecting behavior change in the real world. So we'll spend a lot of time today talking about enforcement. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Gwen to talk a little bit more about some of the outcomes of different workshops that we've had with our groups here.
Yeah, so as Jaden said, right, like I think old world, ship a policy and try to observe some amount of usage has led to a lot of enforcement challenges and just quite frankly gaps. And we know from talking with so many different CISOs and security leaders that that granular level of visibility prior to tools like Maro just hasn't been available. But what if you could live in a world like the New York Times is starting to lead, where you could actually define what the, business oriented value added use cases that AI could help with your workforce. And you could actually see that, monitor that, and then enforce that as well. And like we said, like New York Times is really leading the way here. They are a great example of saying, here are things that like AI is great for, but what we consider our differentiation, our like core value of actually writing stories, absolutely not, right? And they want to be able to monitor and enforce that. And they, the story that we try to tell here is like, if you could get as granular as use case and behaviors, why wouldn't you? And so we use this as a great example of showing an organization that is essentially starting from the point of what matters to their business and then allowing AI to enhance that workload. From there, in several of our workshops, what we have done is then asked security and IT leaders, what specific workloads or use cases are opportunities for you to leverage AI? And what was unsurprising was some of the use cases that came top of mind were in the security, risk, and compliance space, because those were the use cases and the function that they understood best. And we had several exciting stories around how you could use AI to help accelerate security questionnaires and RFPs, something that is a lot of paperwork, as we hear, and takes up a majority of a GRC team's time. And now suddenly you're taking that down to maybe 5% of your team's time so that they can actually focus on security, not just passing audits, right? But there's a lot of opportunity within that space as well around compliance automation, collecting logs and SecOps monitoring, alert translation for executives, you name it. So those are pretty straightforward and came through. But some of the other, more or helpful use cases we heard was in the product development and support space. These are probably unsurprising as well, because a lot of AI tools and softwares like Claude are excellent at software engineering. So unsurprisingly, that's top use case. And by the way, like we use AI assisted coding here at Maro as well as an example, and absolutely using our own tool to help monitor more and more of like what we see in the browser. Solution planning and really like what we would call that is like PRDs is a great support, and we're hearing that from other folks. And then things like customer support assistance. You can imagine there is a world where you had these like really flat customer support bots in the past, and now with LLM-based technology, really making it so much easier to connect and carry on a conversation. Those are becoming one of the primary use cases that folks are using. And the last one here is process documentation. Just a lot of opportunity, right? Now, we did have folks in a lot of our conversations in very specific industries, so we heard more and more of specific use cases that could be helpful to you here on this call. People operations is a big one, so anything to do with HR, if you have any kind of knowledge base, these assistants work a lot like customer support assistants, but for your internal folks, right? Why not build one or leverage, AI to help you there? Employee training content was a big one we heard too, and then performance evaluations, depending on who should be allowed to do this. But this is a great opportunity to leverage AI and be able to granularly segment who within your team can do these things. So your managers, your HR teams, things of that nature. The final one is within the health tech space. So we heard a lot about clinical operations, and this one, of course, comes with a lot of regulation and data privacy, which is why some of the features we've been shipping recently are super important. But the biggest one is patient handling and record keeping came through as a very top use case. Patient care overall and diagnostics is a big opportunity. And then unsurprisingly, especially in these regulated spaces, is anonymizing patient data. So when we have talked with folks of what are the opportunities, these are some that came through loud and clear. But then the next natural question is, okay, now that I want to be able to narrow down by like the value to my business, the workloads that are opportunities that can, speed up, for efficiency's sake, or just add like an innovation enablement function. How do I actually measure that and enforce that? And what we heard the most from all these folks that we've talked to is there is a zone that people are operating on where they're either doing manual assessment, they're using like traditional auditing tools, which might include things like, your firewalls trying to pull logs, trying to pull traffic. Maybe it's your, SASE bench of tools, but it's not giving you granular level behavior, and it's not giving you details of how people are using things. Similar with data governance. So Jen just talked through how we're basically flipping DLP on its head and actually delivering a solution that is kind of like a DLP that people always wanted. DLP solutions tend to be either very noisy or too narrow in a way that they are notoriously hard to enforce, let alone get the level of visibility you need. But when in doubt, if that's the tool you have available to you, you've got to use what you have. And we heard folks are using those kinds of tools to at least try to measure and enforce. And then when in doubt, like it just comes down to alerting when some kind of violation, or maybe like some SIM alert came through because something happened that created an exposure via logs or what have you. And that's like after the fact, that's like post exposure. That's kind of the worst situation you want to be in, but it is happening, and people are at least catching it at the detection and response phase before it potentially gets bigger, so they're able to contain it. Like Jaden alluded to earlier, though, there are a subset of organizations and industries, especially the regulatory industries, that are just going for that hard blocking, where they're just blocking the full URL no matter what, because the stakes are just too high and they don't have the tools to be very surgical with how they're enforcing specific behaviors and engagement with things like customer data or patient data or financial data. Now, more and more, we are hearing the desire to use AI tools to monitor, but these were more of an aspiration we heard of. So there's a lot of opportunity. And then the ideal would be where folks are trying to work up to is automating more of this like policy loop you see on the right-hand side, doing soft blocking. And by soft blocking, we essentially mean like moving into enforcing contextually. And that's down to the specific use case, the secure action or behavior you're trying to monitor and enforce. And it could be down to the role or specific person right at that point in time versus like getting an alert later. So it's clear from talking with a lot of folks, there are a lot of folks still operating in this top zone, but ideally they'd like to get down to this granular controls requirement zone. And Maro's trying to lead the way to help folks do that. What this gets you then is when we talk about Gen AI and the policy loop, is you essentially want to treat policy, like Jaden said, as first observing and then being able to tool your policy guidance based on what you're observing. And you could throw AI assistance in there with a human in the loop and have automated updates. But over time, you would want to train, models or what we're trying to just train our model to observe more and more and then try to give you recommendations based on the observations we're seeing. Of course, still having a human in the loop for deployment and review and things of that nature. But more and more, this is the ideal that people are trying to work to should the tools allow them. I think the big challenge here that we talk about is that policy enforcement gap or policy enforcement chasm. And we are trying to help all the organizations who are seeing AI governance both as an opportunity for their company, but also making sure that people are adopting AI safely and securely and not introducing more exposure into their cyber environments. And with that, Jaden is going to show us a little more of how we're making that happen and possible with Maro.
Okay, awesome. So this is the Maro dashboard, and I promise this demo will be a lot more in depth, I think, in terms of configuration than our last one. So what I wanted to start with was showing you guys how our customers use Maro to initially observe and then get data and really start to build like a mental model of how their organization's AI usage looks, again, before they start to write policy. And what I'll say at the top is that one of the most important stats that we show on our dashboard is an overall idea of policy adherence across all usage of AI chatbots across the web. And the reason this is interesting is because kind of like a flag on the beach that tells you like how rocky or I guess how strong the waves are today. Like, should you swim? The idea here is that policy is not a static thing. And I think that all GRC teams or all InfoSec teams that are dealing with policy, tend to obviously not think about them overall as static, but certainly from the employee's point of view, it's really hard to keep up with all the updates that come out as an organization shifts their own internal policy. With Maro, it doesn't feel that way, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But we know that this is going to be changing on a day-to-day basis. As you learn more about your organization and you update your policies, this flag on the beach is definitely going to change. So what we want to show on a monthly time frame is how often your user sessions are aligned with your policy and how often they're misguided. And the other thing that we're going to show is where this all begins, which is what are the different use cases that people are leveraging AI first for. One thing that we did not show in the last demo, it's actually been added since then, was I'm sure you're all dealing with the issue that, I guess like 3 or 4 months ago, we were saying, well, there's AI apps and there's SaaS apps. And the line there is really starting to blur. So Maro is keeping track of all the different categories of applications that are starting to add AI features, calling themselves AI native. So as our users are coming into their dashboard, what they're often doing is checking for newly discovered AI apps in the last 30 days. And as they look at the most used AI apps, they're able to kind of break this down by category. So I could say, hey, show me all the note takers in my organization and what the relative usage looks like there. And then show me something like the chatbots. And this is where things really start to get fun. So what our users will do is log in and then come look at the different chatbots or any of the categories here. And if I click something like Claude, what you can see here is we've designed the product such that we get a layer of granularity that is really hard to get with other tools like secure web gateways or firewall logs flowing to your SIM or another tool. And that level of granularity is basically generated from the browser extension having a really great idea about the context of what the user is trying to accomplish in a given session. And so what our users will do will come in here and look at the top use cases by tool. And they might find some interesting things. So, you can see here, this is actually the extension that's running on many of our employees' machines internal to Maro as we dog food our own applications. And sometimes you might see interesting things like a new use case that you don't know, you don't really have any idea about. So I might have a question about what recipe sharing means. So I'll click on that in a second. But you can see that Jaden was kind of the user here that generated this use case. So what I might want to do is check out that user and see what their usage looks like across all AI tools and all SaaS apps as well. So you can see here in this really helpful graph how my usage of different apps is changing over time. And you can come down here and see all the use cases that I'm personally engaging in, which will help us write more policy effectively. What we're trying to do here is reduce the time that a security team is spending going out and interviewing people about why they're using different tools. And this is something that tends to be a very, very ad hoc process. So the way that it works today is that security teams will basically wait for a manager or an individual at an organization to submit a request to review a tool. And the user will have to bundle this stuff anyways and say, hey, I'm using this to do, I don't know, image generation for marketing content. So we wanted to bring that directly to the security team. All right, so let's get back to this interesting recipe sharing use case. Maybe I work at KFC, right? And what I don't want is my employees sharing the KFC secret recipe. So what I could do then, now knowing that some users are using LLMs to maybe do some recipe generation work, is I could start to configure a Maro policy. All right. There's three levels at which policy can be configured. And again, the most rudimentary of those three is access level policies. This is basically telling your users whether or not they're allowed to use a tool at the highest level. And I think what we showed in the last demo is when a user navigates this tool, if you had that set to deny, they would get a very helpful toast, and Mara would pop up and say, "Hey, this is against company policy. Make sure you're using one of the approved tools of your organization, like ChatGPT." But things start to get much more interesting when we get down to the use case level. And what you're able to do here is add a use case for anything that you've seen in the wilds. Like you can see recipe research is something that I've observed, or beverage recipe development. What I'm going to do in this case is create a policy here for recipe sharing. And I'm going to add a description like this because I work at KFC. Oh, and I have the chicken. You guys can see I frequently use this chicken emoji. And I'm going to deny this. Cool. And so I've now added a new mapping, a new policy here that if any of our users start to use any AI tool for the purpose of sharing a recipe, it's going to trigger Maro. So I'm going to publish these changes. You'll see that our version increments here to 80. And what's very interesting is we will then start generating violations whenever a user does that. So what I did just a couple minutes ago was actually uh, use Claude, and I was role playing a marketing team member that's working at KFC. And you can see here that I started with requesting a general fried chicken recipe and my personal favorite chicken chain, Bojangles. I was asking, well, how do they cook their fried chicken? And this evolved into me basically asking, well, look, this is how we cook our fried chicken at KFC. Can you help me create competitive advertising content? And then I finished here by saying, can you recreate that in the style of Colonel Sanders? And what's cool here is a couple of things. So you can see that the violations that were triggered by Maro happened on several levels. First was that we said Claude was not actually an approved tool here at Maro. The second thing was that that recipe sharing policy that I just created triggered here. So you can basically free form define, whatever use cases you want Maro to be on the lookout for, and Maro will do its damnness to make sure that it's catching anytime a user is trying to use an LLM for that use case. Lastly, and very interestingly, out of the box, which I'll show you in just a second, we provide a lot of controls for maladaptive behaviors that you don't need to do anything to configure for Maro to start saying, hey, this is something that's likely against your company policy. So in this case, something like sharing your proprietary spice blend recipe didn't need me to really configure this to say, hey, maybe you don't want to be sharing some of your company's trade secrets. So to end off, I want to show you what that looks like. So if I come back into the policy, the third layer at which we provide a lot of controls out of the box is what we call behavior controls. And these are a number of data-related policies, like stopping users from submitting credit card information to different LLMs, all the way down to things that are really industry dependent, like merger and acquisition confidentiality. Here's our trade secret protection that triggered here. And then if we come down, we have some more protections around things like source code confidentiality, something that's happening.
Oh
Oh
no.
no, we may have lost Jaden. Give it 1 second, see if he comes back. Otherwise, Jenna might have you take over and just kind of show the rest. Just one moment, folks. Technical difficulty as always. Okay. I can also log in. Isn't it always fun when people's screens uh, freeze at like the most inopportune moment in the most fun positions? Okay. Jen, do you have it up or do you want me to pull it up? I think you're on mute, Jen.
Oh. Oh, Jaden's back.
Oh, Jaden, we got you back.
I'm
We were
back.
just about to pull up. Oh no, demo gods. Yes, yes.
Oh no. Where did I last cut off?
You were here in the use cases screen still. I think you're going to go to show behavior controls.
Oh no. I didn't show any of the behavior controls.
You started showing them. You're like right
Okay.
in the middle. I
No
think
worries.
you were talking about the source code
All right.
confidentiality one.
Well, I think that what matters here is that out of the box, there's a ton of protections that, our users don't have to configure for the 80% of use cases. These are data level controls that Mara will start to trigger on as people share sensitive information with tools that they shouldn't be. And what I wanted to say next was there's a couple other flows that I think are really interesting. One question we got during our last demo was like, it's really cool you guys have all this configurability, but do I really want another tool where I have to be writing policy all day? And of course, I think you could see how easy it was to just write really policies in the case of Maro is really just free form English. But one thing that we do provide our customers is the ability to work with an AI model, an AI chatbot that can help you do this work without lifting a finger. So one thing you could do is come into our AI policy assistant and you could actually drop existing policy here and say, hey, can you create me policy that mirrors what I already created somewhere else, like in Confluence? Or you could say, hey, I work in the crypto space. Can you generate me some policies that are relevant to my industry? All right. And what Maro will do here is generate you a draft of an update here to your policies, where you can see we've added, the ability to actually do crypto market research and set that to allow because we don't want to be triggering every time, internal analysts are trying to look up or are trying to like discuss or just perform their jobs on a daily basis. What we did also was create a policy here that says, hey, if we're discussing trading strategy, I don't really know yet if that's good or bad, so let's just monitor. And in this case, Mara will start to surface a lot of data around how your users are building their trading strategies. But obviously, we don't want to annoy your users and say, hey, in every single one of these cases, it's good or bad. And then lastly, something that is fairly straightforward, we don't want to be doing research around actual wallet addresses or sharing wallet addresses or any sensitive information. So hopefully this gives you a little taste of how Mara makes it a little bit easier to never really have to get into the knobs and dials of our own internals. Instead, you can kind of stay high level, focus on really understanding how people are using Maro, and then use our AI assist feature to build new policy. One thing I wanted to do was just reiterate here something that Jen showed earlier. So one of the benefits and one of the ways that Mara's different components works really well together is as you define your AI governance strategy, of course, we can provide real-time feedback to users when they are violating those policies. So you saw that source code related policy earlier. And if we have that turned on, you can see here that when a user does things like insert an AWS secret key accidentally into Claude, I'm not actually able to submit this prompt until I do take one of these quick fixes or remediation actions that Jen was talking about earlier. As Jen also showed earlier, it's also really helpful to not, annoy the user by triggering every time they have things like mock data. So something that good developers will do is redact secret keys before they put them into an LLM. And in this case, if we said, hey, we have a regular expression that says anytime this triggers, you're cutting the user off, that would be frustrating as hell. So Maro is smart enough to know when a user has done the right thing and is not providing a real key here and is able to not trigger a violation and not tell the user that they're engaging in misguided behavior. I'll end this demo by showing one of our weekly reports here. So what we do for all of our customers and with all of our customers is provide them with a dossier that they can take to their AI governance committees on a weekly basis. So instead of going into those meetings as the security team, as the party of no, instead you're able to come in with data and show that productivity is really what you're able to be a champion of at your organization. So I'll quickly scan through this, but I think the most important parts of our reports are high-level observations and recommendations around new high-risk apps entering your ecosystem, how that's going to change the policy in your AI governance strategy, and maybe even some training needs that your users will then have to address. And really, this section here is what we hope to equip all of our customers with as they continue to, on a regular basis, update their AI governance strategies. Again, this isn't a static once and done. This is something that will continue to evolve over the next couple of years as technology continues to evolve at an incredible pace. And we hope that our customers feel that Maro is always equipping them with the ability to take a data-driven approach to building a strong AI governance program. So, sorry I cut out. Gwen, I wanted to transition it back to you and just take a look at three really quick tips that we have heard from our users, and we do share with as many security leaders as possible. So if you're on the call today and you're wondering, okay, you guys talked to 80 folks, like what can I do today to put a foot in the right direction of building a world-class AI governance program? Here's our three tips. The first one is dig a watering hole. We have talked to a number of organizations that, for good reason, right? They're in highly regulated industries. They just have to say, actually, no AI usage, and we'll figure this all out later. But we found that even in those industries, it's very, very helpful to pick at least one or two AI tools in every category, and then force user or really give users the ability to access at least some tools that will allow them to up level their productivity. So this could look like buying an enterprise license of ChatGPT or using Gemini if you're in California. And the goal here is to just make it easier for users to use approved tools than to bypass your restrictions, which is what users are want to do. Tip two is evolving your program. So this is a different view on the framework that I showed earlier. And really what we see happening here is an evolution from policies that are really just focused on access into ones that are focused on use cases and sensitive data and making sure there are guardrails around those things. And then third, and teasing what, as Jen said, Mara will be showing off probably in our next demo, is how do we get an additional level of granularity and map use cases and data types to the users, the actual identities that should be responsible for those workflows. And lastly, we want our security and AI governance teams to really become strategic enablers. I always credit David Berg, who I took some of this content from in terms of the shadow prompt flow and the governed prompt flow. And you can see that, today the shadow prompt flow is, I guess, the status quo. Employees are using public tools. There's really no safeguards for the data, and managers are left with all of the risk. We hope to show that with Maro, there's a world where really employees can use any public tools, and the security team, with our incredible purview, instead of acting like kind of like a surveillance estate, instead we can really start to drive proper safeguards around what our employees are using and guide employees to better conclusions too. So how about we equip our managers with best practices around how to accomplish the use cases Gwen was showing 4 or 5 slides ago, instead of letting users kind of run willy-nilly and incur all the risk. One of the best, I think, examples of this that Gwen and I heard in the last couple months is an organization that found their number one use case was performance reviews. And instead of just saying, hey, our policy says you can do that now, they equipped all of their managers with a template, including specific prompts that they could use, as well as guidelines around what not to do when they were doing performance reviews for their direct reports. So they would say things like, use this prompt and make sure that you're not, submitting two sets of data from different team members in the same session, which obviously stops LLMs from then blending data across different employees in very inappropriate ways. So hopefully this was helpful. What I want to do is send off here by passing it back to Gwen and showing you how to get started if you're looking at this demo and you're like, that's awesome, but I don't really even have an AI policy.
Yeah, so you know, sometimes the first step is some kind of guidance, as we've alluded to here. Ideally, you'd be able to use something like Maro and Observe, and then over time, complete your policy learning loop and be able to intelligently make decisions on, what's included in that policy. But when in doubt, sometimes you just need a draft. So we did create a free tool and release it back in August, in case you are not aware. And what we do here is we ask you just a few simple questions about your industry, your company size, your AI maturity level, and your risk tolerance, just to already cater a starting policy for you. And so an example we often use, finance is a big one. We've talked about that requires some kind of regulation. We'll just assume Maro is a finance organization. You'll actually come in here and start to see population of specific data. And you can continue to kind of turn these knobs and dials pretty easily, but I'm just going to walk you through a few things really quickly so you can see it. We'll auto select both what is required and what we would recommend as well from an information security organization perspective. And when it comes to AI, there are actually certain secure actions and behaviors that are new in ways that other SaaS tools don't necessarily require, but we can also take some lessons from SaaS, like verifying tool approval and using your corporate email. But things that are unique to AI are things like, checking the input sensitivity, turning off data sharing for model training potentially. There's a reminder of storing outputs responsibly. Hallucinations is a big one, so on and so forth. So this is already giving you a starting point for all the things that we've learned and the kinds of secure actions you need to consider advising your organization on when it comes to using AI. And then this model follows very closely the Maro model, where we're giving you ability to set, access level controls around the 25 most common AI apps in the browser that we're seeing. Unsurprisingly, you'll see, the general purpose LLMs, but then you'll see more purpose-built AI tools like, V0, Miro AI, like where AI is embedded, so that you have a starting point. And then what we did for use cases is we actually combined the top 25, might be a little bit more, but we took every major department in a company and normalized that, and then added the top 5 use cases per department that you could start adding guidance on as well. But when in doubt, you can add your own here, same with AI apps. And the final piece are those behavior guidelines or those behavior controls that you saw in Maro. So things that are either required or recommended for your organization. And then you might want to add additional details depending on what your risk model is. Now, when you come into the right here, you'll actually see that we started building this policy out. And things that we're including as part of these guidelines is examples of like secure actions and what unsecure might look like. So either you can use this for your purposes, or you can use this to guide your employees as well. And then we just continue building this out. And then at the end, you can download it either as an HTML file, a PDF, a Markdown, whatever is important for you in the way that you want to at least start to review a draft as your first AI policy. And when I download that, I'll actually see that I can pull it in, and it automatically generated my AI policy draft as well, put a date on it. And this can be your starting point, right? Like you can use this as a starting point with your current team, with your legal team. Of course, always have legal look at these things. And you could actually take this same policy, and Jaden had shown the, AI assist mode with building your policy, and you can actually build your policy by using this builder as well. So it's an all-in-one system to at least get you started. So again, this is free. We highly, highly encourage, if you haven't used something like this or you don't have something like this yet, that we would absolutely love you to use this tool. And with that, I think we do have one more question. And we have a few minutes left. So the
Uh,
question is, oh, do you see it, Jaden?
yeah, no, I do.
I'll let you take it.
Since the tuning of policies is organic, what reports track the changes in governance over time to show an auditor or executive team member? And I do have some screens here to show. So obviously there was the weekly report, right, that you can show on a weekly basis to show. I just said weekly report to show twice. But what you want to do is basically, as you're talking to your AI governance committee, is really focus on this, right? So um, this piece will show a monthly trend of aligned behaviors and how that's improving month to month. And if you wanted to get even deeper, Maro does allow you, I guess, from more of an auditor perspective, to keep track of all of the version updates to your policy, as well as being able to actually download all of the reference docs that are coming from those different version updates. And one thing I think we might have showed briefly during the last demo is you're also able to show the performance of your latest policy and show the policy acknowledgement status across your users. So especially from an audit perspective, I think one weakness of the current approaches to closing the policy enforcement chasm, as Gwen called it, is basically once a year or whenever policy gets updated, you email users and you say, hey, just click this box. Maro tries to turn that equation on its head and say, hey, every time that a user checks the policy in the Maro sidebar, then here we're able to show what policy they checked, what policy version, and if they still violated policy before or after checking the latest version. So as you can see, we're gathering a lot of data here around attestation in a much more dynamic way. When you mix that with the ability to keep a strong audit trail, and then on a monthly basis also show if misguided behaviors are on an upswing or a downswing. We think that's a whole new set of metrics that really InfoSec and GRC teams have not been able to surface in the past. Before it was really just a static measurement of what percentage of my users signed the policy. Okay, we're at 100, let's move on.
Yeah, and I know we're just about up on time, but I'll also plug, we recognize, as Jaden highlighted, that there's a lot more need for metrics reports and, showing efficacy and progress in your GRC program. So we're teasing future reports too as a next demo item, and we'd love to deep dive that with you next time. Well, we are still figuring out what our December date is, so please stay tuned for that. I think that's it from the Maro team today. Thank you everyone for attending, and look out for the recording and future demo invite coming soon.